Morning, everyone, and welcome to the last breakout session of this year's virtual Lower Fox Farmer Roundtable. I'm Jamie Patton, still with the Nutrient and Pest Management Program, and we are going to get started in a few minutes here today. But before we get started, I wanted to take a minute to thank this year's Farmer Roundtable Planning Committee, as well as our sponsors. So you could have seen their names and logos on the opening slides, and whether in person or online, without these individuals and sponsors, the roundtable wouldn't be possible. So thank you to them and for you for joining us today. I see a lot of familiar names in the attendee box, but we'll still go through some of the logistics of how we operate these webinars. So first, please keep your microphone and your videos turned off while we are presenting. If you have questions, you can type them in the question box. So in WebEx, you'll see the question box in your control panel, probably off to the side. You can type those questions in at any time. If you're having difficulties with hearing, there is an call-in audio function, so you can click on the audio button up in your control panel again, and it will have a call-in number, and you're able to listen through your phone at that point in time. Also, there are going to be CCA credits today as usual. So at the end of the webinar today, you'll see that CCA code flash on the screen. If you're unable to scan that, you can type your name as well as your numbers into the question box, and we'll get those entered into the American Society of Agronomy. So with that, we will, without delay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be hearing from Nick Dallman and John VandenBoom. They're going to tell us a little bit about themselves, their operations, and how they utilize irrigation to manage manure on their farms. So first up will be Nick. And so Nick, if you're able to share your slides with me.
All right, can you see them now?
That is perfect. You have your McAfee antivirus subscription up, so we can click that off. Perfect.
All right. Yeah,
excellent.
I'm Nick Dallman from, what's that, Jamie?
I just said excellent, and if you want to show your video, you can. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, I'm Nick Dallman from, do you want my webcam on too?
It's up to you, if your internet can handle it.
Okay, I'll probably leave it off. Anyways, so yeah, Nick Dallman from Dallman East River Dairy. Yeah, we have, we run roughly 3,300 acres of cropland, 3,000 cows, and roughly 5,000 head of cattle altogether on site. So we'll be talking about the irrigation system, how we collect our runoff water, bunker leachate, and all that, how that gets collected into a separate storage area. We got a separate 8 million gallon storage area that we use for that, and how we utilize that water, and some cost savings and benefits that we see from that. So this is just an overlay of our farm. So the main area that we're collecting here with the bunker leachate and the irrigation that we're using is this whole area down here by the bunkers. We have a couple small outdoor lots with our small barns that drain down in this area. On the south side of the bunkers here, we have a retention pond with a 10-horse pump. That 10-horse pump pumps the water and the runoff water and all that. We collect 100% of it. It's made for a 25-year rain event. It pumps it up to the separate 8 million gallon storage over here to the south that we have just for that. And then from there, we use that runoff water to run through our center pivots. Okay, I can't get it to move. There we go. This is a picture of the river screen. This is an old photo. We actually, that pit that we have there, the 8 million gallon pit, it originally was a 4 million gallon. We only left it at 4 million gallon for 2 years. That was even during dry years. We realized how much water we were actually collecting. We were collecting 100% of it, so it was expanded. But anyways, this older photo shows the river screen that we use. We just basically put this river screen in. It keeps the long solids and things like that out of the system that can plug up the nozzles on our center pivots. So there's a draw pump that we run, and then there's a booster pump. The draw pump basically draws it up, and then the booster pump pressurizes it and sends it through our pipeline that we have now and out to our pivots. Yeah, this is a picture of, this is a newer photo. I zoomed in here just to show our current setup now. So we have one tractor that runs both pumps. So we run our booster pump in front and then the draw pump in the back. Basically the draw pump feeds the booster, like I said, and then our pipeline, you can see the risers right there, and it feeds right into the pipeline. So from there on, there's no hose, no nothing that until we get out to the center pivot. This is a closer picture of our newer center pivot that we have to the north now, that we just finished up this year. So basically our risers from our pipeline, we have a 10-inch pipeline that comes up, everything's underground, and then with a series of valves and things underneath. That pipeline, then we just run a soft hose, 25-foot soft hose to connect to our pivots. Real simple, real easy, keeps everything nice and clean. So basically open up some valves, and within a matter of a couple of minutes, I can have the center pivots running. We're able to run both our center pivots. The one to the north, our newer center pivot, covers roughly 63 acres. The one to the south covers 90 acres in a half circle. It does like a three-quarter circle on the one to the north. But we're able to run both center pivots off that one pump off the same pipeline. Makes it a very efficient system. This is a video of our south pivot that we had running this summer. This is a fresh seeding field. Shortly after we took off the fresh seeding in August, was the first time we had a decent opportunity this year to run the pivots. So this is basically applying 3/10 of an inch of water over that area. You can see here we're running the spinner nozzles, but this pivot to the south, we're able to switch those nozzles out. We can run a straight stream, or we can actually run bubblers also on this system. I know some people are worried about drift with manure and runoff water and all that. So we're able to run bubblers on there if we want. For better coverage, we run the spinners. We don't really notice too much drift at all or odor with it. At certain years when you get more concentrated leachate, I know with the past few years with the runoff, all the liquid that we've been collecting, it's been very dilute product, so we don't get a lot of odor with it. But at certain years, you can get quite a bit of odor with the leachate, actually more so than even a manure at times. So you have to watch out with that a little bit. And this is basically the operating unit that we have. We run TL systems. They're hydraulically driven. Then they have small diesel engines on that run the hydraulic pump on them. So basically we have that 30-gallon diesel tank there, and I think I can do 2 passes before I can fill that back up. So I can basically run that over 18 hours on that 30 gallons. So very little fuel use when running all this. This is a video of that running. And that's basically all I have.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Nick. When we're looking at, John will be calling up his slides here in a second. So Nick, while we're thinking about this, have you calculated a dollar savings of applying manure in this manner versus a traditional manner?
So we have 8 million gallons of storage, and I looked the past 3 years with all the rain we've had, we've done over 8 million gallons. I've even transferred a couple times to our manure pit from our leachate pits when it hasn't even been feasible to run the irrigation pivots. So you can figure out that 8 million gallons on, we have a fairly small even area. It's all bunkers. We're not a massive large feed pad or anything like that. So with collecting 100% of that, and you're talking 80, and if you're seeing a cent per gallon, you're talking over $80,000 a year of savings. So the entire system to the south overnight, I basically figured $1,000 per acre when you're setting up a system like this. For the most part, I think it was just over 90,000 when we had to drop nozzle and everything set up. but that's not including any of the pipeline work or anything like that. But for the pivot itself and utilizing that water, so it's, cost savings and utilizing that, and it's not even considering yield gain or anything like that, but can easily have it paid back within a couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick. John, do you have slides
Yep.
for us today, or are you coming in by phone?
Can you hear me?
I can.
I do not have slides. I'm just
Okay,
coming
perfect.
in by phone due to coronavirus. I am quarantined now, so I'm calling in, so I don't have access to my computer even. So that's how we're running today.
Sounds good. Well, take care, and I will turn you loose on your phone.
So, did you want me to jump right in? Just a few comments kind of about what we've been doing with irrigation.
That would be great.
So, thanks to Nick, we have a very similar system, so you can kind of get the picture of how it runs. The biggest difference we have is that we are trying to utilize our waste, our water system, our leachate all goes into our manure system. So the biggest difference is we put our river screen in our pond 3 at our Elm location, and we're actually using liquid manure that we're putting through there. At this point, the solids is low enough that we can utilize it. A little different. So since I've been at Holsum, we have not utilized our irrigation system a lot. The main couple reasons behind that is one, the pivot irrigation is actually set up on land that's not owned by Holsum. It's a grower, so the conditions have to be right for him to want that manure put over the crop. And the other thing is, when those conditions are right, we are limited on what the weather conditions can be too when manure is being pumped through the pivot. The couple times that we've utilized it that I've been here with the manure, it's been on a hay crop. We've used it right after cutting, and as the hay has been, it was roughly 5-6 inches in growth. We've seen good results with it as a great way to utilize the manure and a quick and easy way to pump manure. The setup's very quick and easy to do. It worked fantastic on the hay that was just cut. The hay that was up, I can say just from my own observations, we did have some yellowing of leaves, and I did have pictures, but obviously today I can't put those up. But you could just make out where the pivot circle was from the road, from the road view. It was very, very. You could just make it out. It was, with the untrained eye, you wouldn't be able to really tell that it had yellowed the alfalfa a little bit. The grower, what he was really interested in, it was a dry time of year. He wanted to give it some moisture to help it take off. And the problem we ran into, it was just, I think, so dry that it didn't soak into the ground enough. We didn't give it quite enough moisture to get that boost that he was looking for. It didn't soak down into the roots far enough where we gave it enough that it would soak in. And then I think it just kind of dried on the leaves and created some yellowing. So I wish I'd have more pictures to show of that. But I don't know that it affected yield at all. I don't remember him complaining or having any issues with that. But it would have been nice if we could have put manure out there and actually went around with just some water afterwards, because it still, after the pivot went through, you could still kick the ground, and only the very first top was actually wet. So I think to notice that moisture boost, we would have needed to give it a little bit more. But that's the only real crop I've had experience running it on. We haven't done much besides that, and he wasn't real interested in trying it on corn or anything like that. And the conditions, as much moisture as we've had the last few years, he was not interested in trying to get that moisture boost. So I personally haven't had a lot of work with the pivot irrigation, but without the pictures, that's kind of all I got today as well. So, but if there's questions, I can try to answer them the best I can.
You betcha, and we do have some questions coming in, so thank you, John. So question for Nick or John, any plans to include liquid fertilizers mixed in with the leachate water when irrigating? So using more of a fertigation type protocol.
From our point of view, probably not. So what we'd like to do ideally is get, so we've been just doing everything we can to just get rid of the water basically the past couple of years here. But ideally what I'd like to do is, I know John had touched on it, but so we've tried pulling manure out of our pit, and our consistency is just too thick. We're not able to draw it out. Like he said, they have different stages that they're drying off their third stage. But so ideally what we'd like to do is if I can get caught up on just getting the water out, I'd like to bring some manure into our leachate pit ideally, and bring some fertilizer value to the leachate water, because right now with just collecting the runoff water and the leachate water, there's very little, if any, value. Our NP and K, I think we're down around the 1, 2, 3 range on most of the tests that I've been running on that. So that's all I got for that.
Yeah. Using the manure, we're not looking to add any additional besides what we have in the manure. It is pretty, with our third stage and then pit and our solid separator, it's pretty thin at that point, and I don't worry too much about it setting the crop back. I think this was more of actually just it's still kind of brown water, and it still kind of dries on the leaves with the hot, dry conditions we had. But using it in between the crops, I think it worked. It works really nice, and it's there, it's set up, it's really quick to do, and a cheap way as far as not having the irrigation tractor and setting up holes and stuff like that. So, but we haven't looked at any other additional nutrients.
Excellent. Thank you for those answers. We do have a question. How do you keep the nozzles from plugging up on the sprinkler system? So you mentioned you both use river screens. Is there another filtration process, or do you have issues whatsoever? Different types of nozzles plug more than others?
So one of the things that we do, so we have our pipeline that we use that we run up to our pivots. So after we run manure through our pipelines, we have to make sure that we run the river screen in our leachate system and then flush the pipeline out. So if we'd let manure in there or anything like that, any types of solids like that, then we'd end up with plugging. But once we run the river screen, have everything flushed out, then it works well. After we're done, the last field basically that we're running that direction with our pipeline, I will fire up the river screen in the leachate system and flush out that section of pipeline and make sure it's always clean. And after that, I have very little plugging with anything, as long as you're running it through the river screen.
Yeah, with the river screen, we have very little issue. It's also taking from the top of even with the 3-stage manure pit, it's also taking from the top, so we're not sucking a lot of thicker manure off the bottom. We're not agitating with the river screen. We haven't had any issues, but they're easy enough to clean, but we haven't had any issues.
So for those who aren't as familiar, what is a river screen? Can you describe that to us?
Yeah, I had a photo of it. It was the first slide that I had. It's just basically like a aluminum boat that sits inside on top of the water and just spins around. And as it's spinning, there's nozzles on the inside that are spraying the solids off, and it's drawing from the inside, and it just spins around and basically keeps all the solids on the outside of the screen, and it's drawing water in through the screen basically.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's yeah, good. Yeah, I mean, if you had the picture, but that's a good explanation. It keeps the solids from going in, and it cleans the screen as it's spinning around, taking liquid off the top.
So you talked a lot about using leachate waters, and John, you talked about using manures. Have you found any limitations with the manure sources?
Like I said, that hay crop that we applied on that was up and growing, not just after it was cut. I don't think it was nitrogen burning. I think it was just more kind of that it just sat and dried on the leaves. You know, we didn't have any wind. It was sunny, and we did notice that it yellowed a little bit. I'd like to try, not to the point where it scared us that we wouldn't use it again. I would like to try on some different crops like corn and maybe in the beans, but I'd like to try corn and see how that utilizes, especially when it's young and growing. But we have not tried it on that. And with the hay, when you can cut it, you know, if you're getting 4 crops and cutting it, if you get the weather, it's just a bigger window to use it there. I mean, if you were to have a grass crop or something, I think that would be great, especially with a little nitrogen in there, just really help it come back real quick. But it has to be, you know, we're not sucking thick manure and putting it out there, and it's thinner, watery stuff that's gone through the river screen, so not a lot of solids.
Yeah, we haven't had any issues or anything like that. I know if we go back to 2017, we had a wet year then, and I remember looking at, there's some Google Earth photos that were taken that late that fall, and you could actually see we had corn in that field that year. Didn't get the nitrogen side dress or anything that we wanted to that year just because it was so wet. But we could actually see where the pivot turned that year. It was actually darker. It was a perfect half moon in that area. So there, you know, even with the little fertilizer value that it was, I think I figured out it was only like 11 total units that we put on that year through the leachate water. There's some value to it and seen some benefit from that way.
Excellent. So I think, Nick, you hinted at about a 3/10 of an inch, or how much are you applying at any given time? Is it based upon soil moisture, or sorry, are you measuring soil moisture conditions using tensiometers? Are we just estimating a crop need?
So yeah, so this, with our new pivot, working with the NRCS on that one a little bit. So we'll be doing some soil, I'll have soil probes and stuff that'll do some monitoring this coming year. But with our heavy clay and stuff, for the most part, it's just a matter of getting rid of the water, honestly, the past few years, and putting it on whenever I got a dry spell. That's what we've basically been doing here, fighting all this heavy rain we've been getting lately. But ideally, I'd like to, you know, underneath the pivot, just never let it get behind. Because as soon as you get behind them moisture-wise, you're fighting it and you can't get caught back up. I know through DNR they consider the leachate water almost the same as manure. It's a processed wastewater. So we're only allowed to apply, I think it's 10,000 gallons, so we're up to 0.35 inches through the pivot at any one time. So on an application.
And for those who aren't as familiar, go ahead. I was gonna say, for those, Nick, who aren't as familiar with irrigation, so if you're applying about 1/3 of an inch of water, how big is your irrigation system, and how long does it take for it to move to complete a circle?
So our one to the south so it does a half circle, and that covers 90 acres. So if we're at 1/4 inch, which is the fastest I can turn that system, it'll take 9 hours from one side of the field to the other, from north to south. And then on our other system, just getting used to that one a little bit, that runs 63 acres, and that's a smaller system, but it can do basically like 7/8 of a circle. it's bumped up against a wetland on one side and then to the other. But that ideally, if I can run both them systems, but the other one will take actually a little bit longer to complete over the whole field just because it's making a closer to a full circle.
Mm-hmm. John, you were gonna.
As far as I just touched on the rate thing with manure, ours has been based with the same rules, really applying just what we can as far as the total amount of gallons. The DNR rules, that's kind of what it's been based on. I think there's days when it's dry enough and sure more would soak in, but we're limited on certain applications as far as that goes.
So there was a question from the audience. So are you both CAFOs, and what rules are there for you for putting manure through the irrigation? So we mentioned the rate. You said 0.35 inches. Are there other rules and regulations that you're conscious of as you're starting to apply?
Basically, the biggest thing is the initial setup. There's quite a bit of rules, extra rules and things like that for that. You got to be more than 5 feet separation to groundwater. So we had some W soils in both the fields. Had to do a bunch of soil borings and digging with that. I know we had to run a lot of corn down now just because it was a timing thing to dig in a couple W soils to verify that we were greater than 5 feet of separation from groundwater on that end of things. And then we got to verify with recording wind speeds, things like that. You got to keep track of all that while you're applying. And then, yeah, the 10,000 gallons per application is kind of the biggest thing that you got to watch.
Yeah, we have the same thing for Holsum. We are capable. Yes, the same thing that Nick just described. We put up a weather monitoring system actually just for that, so we could keep track and then document better the wind and weather conditions as we're trying to utilize it more.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. I'm asking questions. No one's answering because I'm muted. So I apologize. So moving forward, if a farm was considering irrigation, what considerations would you have them pay attention to? So, for example, what challenges did you incur when you first started using irrigation, and what would you have done differently looking back?
From ours, yeah, if it gets the regulations and stuff for the CAFOs and using processed wastewater or manure or anything like that, it's getting harder and harder. So if you're planning on something, get the ball rolling sooner than you think. Just where I know we had to send soil samples in and things like that can hold a project up. No matter putting up a pivot, anything like that, it goes fairly quickly. And the setup they had, the last one they did was, I think that's 5 towers on that system, and they had that set up in a matter of 2 days with 3 guys. The systems itself are fairly simple, easy to operate, and in that, but it's just getting everything in a row and sets with the nozzles, configuration, things like that first before you get started, so that the DNR has that all. They'll need all that information, the type of system, nozzles, all that submitted to them before you can start applying anything. So that's probably the biggest challenge we see.
Yeah, for Holsum, once again, I think Nick hit it pretty exact. It's those are the biggest challenges, the kind of regulation, that the use of it, the using the irrigation. I think it's a great and cost-effective way to move manure. Whenever you look at or wastewater, whenever you look at your costs for moving things, whenever it's pretty self-sufficient as if you know what you're doing setting it up. So I think it's a great way to do that. It's more of the monitoring and regulation you have to watch sometimes than other things. So the actual use is very, very simple. A great way to utilize water. So.
Yeah, just to touch on what John was saying, yeah, it's very efficient way to move liquid. Like I said, that we got that tractor running both pumps. That tractor only runs 1,500 RPMs, and we're running both systems, which are set up at 800 gallons per minute. When they're pressurized, it runs on a pressure system, but it's, I mean, really efficient. And then both small diesel engines turning the pivot itself, turning at a slow speed. It's an efficient way to move liquid.
Excellent. And maybe I wasn't paying attention. John, are you using diesel to run your pivot as well? Electricity, natural gas?
To turn the pivot is a diesel, and then to pump the liquid, that is an electric pump hooked up back at the pit. But then to turn the actual pivot, that is a diesel.
Okay. So what feedback have you gotten from the community, your neighbors? Positive, negative? The farmers that you're utilizing the water on?
I know we had to get so there's some setback that you have to have from homes and residential spots. So we had to get a couple waivers from the residents, and just going to explain to them if it's less manure pumping, it's less manure hauling, trucks like that. So they're happy. I think I ended up getting 4 or 5 total waivers for the 2 systems because the setbacks weren't quite up to what the DNR requires. So they are able to just get basically a variance. But they were happy, very happy to sign off on that when I explained to them the amount of liquid that we're preventing from being trucked and things like that, and how we're using it. And they're really, nobody's familiar with irrigation in this area, so it's a little bit hard to explain to people at first, but once they get to see it going and stuff, they like the way it works, and it's kind of interesting to them. So for the most part, for all our neighbors and other farmers and stuff, they've been happy with it, very happy with it.
As far as neighbors that in the non-egg community that live near the pivot irrigation for Holsum, we've had from what I know, zero complaints of when it's running. We're cautious or conscious of which way the wind's blowing a little bit, but we've really had zero negative feedback of it running, and even when it's running right along a pretty well used county highway, it doesn't even look, when it's going out of the nozzles and it's brown, but it doesn't even look like it's manure spewing out of a pivot irrigation. So very little to zero negative feedback that way. And as far as the grower that it's operates on their land, when he's got his when it's a hay crop under the pivot irrigation, he's always wondering why we can't use it more. He really likes having it go over. But if you obviously can't use it every day, and it is still manure, so you have to watch nutrients and restrictions there. But he's been very well receptive. He likes it a lot. So he likes the idea of getting nutrients there and some moisture for that crop growing. So he's all for using it more and more.
So when you look at these systems, so as you're removing leachate waters and some of that extra runoff water, has this improved your risk management strategy for handling manure? For example, is this providing a kind of a stress relief of potentially the lagoons being overfull in the fall and spring? So how has it impacted your manure management overall in that aspect?
It's been tremendous. I mean, like I said, over 8 million gallons the past 3 years. That's a lot of extra acres that you'd be looking for to move that amount of manure. And then when you're moving manure, you're moving a lot more concentrated products. So so you can cut rates way back, and with the wet situations that we've had, that's a major benefit the last few years here. And then just you get, like, even this past year, you get the dry spells, and just a major benefit from that. Just getting that liquid out there when the crop needs it. So but for the manure aspect of it, just keeping that manure concentrated as possible is a major benefit, and keeping all that water out of it. I would never if I had to do the system again, I'd do it over and over again, just for that reason.
With as far as changing the manure program at Holsum, I don't just because of the sheer volume of manure gallons, I don't know that it's changed the program as far as I think we just need more irrigation to completely change it. But anytime you can have your manure crew working on other fields, and you can have this running at the same time with little maintenance and very easy to run. It takes stress off of having to move manure other places. So the more you can do that, the happier everybody is, especially in the fall when it gets busy.
So I'm just reminding the audience, if you have questions, please get those into the question box. We did have a question. So is there a difference in setback if the waiver is signed by the neighbors versus if it isn't? Or can you not go ahead if there isn't a waiver signed by the neighbors for utilization of these practices?
Yeah, I can't offhand. I can't remember how far back that it has to be from a residence. I know there was some studying and stuff going on a few years ago up in Kewaunee County about drifting and things like that. That's how they ended up coming up with the setbacks. I know with these drop nozzles and running only a foot off the ground, there's very little drift, even if it would happen to get windy and head towards their direction. But so I can't remember offhand what the actual setback was. I thought it was like 250 feet. So I know we get fairly close with our one to the north. I think we get within 100 feet of a couple of houses, or close to 100 feet of a couple houses. So that the neighbors don't have a problem with it at all. With signing that waiver. I know with talking to DNR and stuff, they said as long as we had some variances that they were fine with it. So.
Yeah, and as far as our system, I can't answer that too much. I don't think we have anything signed. I think we're just trying to follow the setbacks with our irrigation system.
Thank you. The audience is curious. What distances are you pumping? So how far away are these systems from your main farm and pit?
Our two pivots they're both fields basically across the road and across the railroad tracks from our farm. So they're very close. To the pivot itself, we are probably half mile on one to the north and probably 3/4 mile to the one on the south.
Excellent. One of the audience members asked, are you happy with the service and support from TNL, positives or negatives?
Yeah, we've been very happy with it. Yeah, so it's T&L system, TIP out of Custer over by Stevens Point. They're the ones that did the actual install of the system. But yeah, once it's been up there, I think I had one little valve break, but otherwise they haven't been out at all. I mean, it's a very simple system. Call with a couple questions here and there when I initially got used to running the system, but otherwise it's simple to run. It's very little maintenance. If anything, it's very simple. It's easy to run.
Any winterization needed?
No, everything drains out. Is self-draining, the pivots and all that. So no, it doesn't have to be winterized at all. It's the diesel engines and the hydraulics and stuff work when it's a little colder, get a little harder to operate. I know we usually run our one pivot to the south. We run it so it's nice and close to the woods. So we put a deer stand on it, and in the fall towards so it gets a little iffy moving it in November, but otherwise we've done it. We've turned it in November, and it works fine.
Yeah, as far as winterization, everything's drains out. So the hose to the line to the pivot from the pit to the pivot is that's just temporary, like ley line for manure irrigation. So that gets blown out and wrapped up just like any other hose. But other than that, it all pretty much self-draining. So
yeah, as far as that goes, with our pipeline, all our risers we blow out in the winter too, with our pipeline, with air, all the risers, and make sure that there's nothing in the frost zone on our pipeline.
Very good. So attendees, please get those questions into the question box. But right now I don't have any pending questions. So Nick or John, do you have any other comments that we haven't covered today that are important for everyone to know?
Basically, if anybody's thinking about a system like this, I know I would do it over and over again. It's like I said, it's an easy system to operate. It's efficient. So I would do it again, and just keeping that liquid out and not working with a different, when you're talking about runoff from your bunker system and all that, and everybody's talking about these different types of systems. And I know we're constrained with a major drainage ditch that runs around our farm, so we can't have massive VTAs, anything like that, for this water and filtering out this water. So this was an easy way to grab this water, and we're hoping actually to have a really dry year once and really see what we can do and how much we could boost yield under the pivot versus the other areas of the field. So
yeah, and I mean, if you have the right situation where you have either water, wastewater, or thin manure, I think it's a spectacular way to either try to keep that water out of the system, where you can concentrate your manure, or an extra window to get rid of manure, utilize manure. You kind of, to the point, you got to have a little bit of the right setup, either water or the thin manure. But if you have that, I think it's a great opportunity to look at.
Excellent.
yeah,
Thank you, gentlemen. Go ahead.
Like John was saying, like John was saying too, just if you get a chance to put manure on a growing corn crop throughout the season, small amounts, I think you can really cut back on nitrogen use, and I think you can see a major yield benefit from that on the manure or on the corn side of things.
Excellent. Any last questions, audience? I was gonna say, do you see putting clean water from a well into the pivot? So we've talked a lot about the benefits of getting water out in season. So do you ever see yourself going to just pure straight up irrigation?
So we actually drilled not too far from our leachate pit. We drilled actually a well, And with intentions, it was a 16-inch casing with intentions of pumping directly to the pivot if we ever ran out of leachate water out of the pivot if we get a significantly dry year. So we have that well. Our intentions were to get 800 gallons a minute flow out of that well, and we got nowhere near that. We can only get a little over 200 gallons a minute, and we start getting the rest of our pumps hanging in the area of the wells. So our intention is to basically pump. What we'd probably do is put a small pump in that well that we have there now, and pump over to our pit and pump just basically clean water into the pit if it ever comes to that, and it would be a significantly dry period, and then just utilize our pumps again and our pipeline to apply that clean water basically. So that is an option that we have if it ever get that dry.
So Nick's a step ahead of us. We don't have any plans in the work, but in my head, I do see a huge benefit of having the ability to use clean water as well. Instead of just manure, then you kind of open up your possibilities of what you can use the pivot for. But I definitely see benefits of having that ability, which we don't have, but I think that's something maybe in the future we will investigate.
Excellent. Any last questions, audience? If not, I will ask Emily to put the CCA credit up into our screen so that we can start to scan that. Again, any last questions from the audience? Giving you a minute, so this is the dead silence on these technologies as I'm waiting for you to type. And I am not seeing any at the moment. So with that, Nick and John, I thank you very much for sharing your experiences and educating us on using irrigation to manage manure. So it's been a great conversation. So I look forward to coming out and actually seeing these systems. So it's going to be a great opportunity, particularly in these dry years, as you've been mentioning, to see how these systems can really pay off in crop productivity as well as profitability in our area. So for those of you who are CCAs, please scan. If not, you can enter your first and last name as well as numbers into the chat box or into the question box, and we will make sure and get you your credits for today. Other than that, I still see no questions. I would like to thank you all for attending the virtual Lower Fox Roundtable, and I see the sponsors are listed here. Again, this has been quite the undertaking and a really unique year to get this going on a web-based situation. Hopefully next year we can be back in person, nailing it all in one day and interacting in the hallways and sharing our experiences one-on-one. So with that, I'm going to close up the webinar. Again, I see no questions. Thank you again, Nick and John. Thank you, Emily and the Planning Committee, for a great Lower Fox Roundtable series. And hopefully I will see you all soon in the field, or I will see you next year at our in-person event. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.